Welcome back, this is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we are going to be playing with glitter and inks and just have some fun and create this beautiful peekaboo tumbler. As always, I'll make sure to put everything I used today into the description box so that you guys can recreate this item if you would like to. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. I'm going to use a 40-ounce tumbler again, just like we did on our last tutorial. So the first thing I did was just make sure that the screws are on nice and tight for the handle. I sanded it and then I primed it this white color. So now the next thing we are going to do is apply our glitter. Now I'm not focusing getting that glue onto the very bottom, nor am I going to really care about the handle as well, because those are going to be spray painted anyways. I'm mainly focused on the center body of this tumbler to glitter. And the glitter I'm going to be using today is called Bubbly, and you can purchase that at socglitters.com if you would like to. So once my glue is down, I'm going to go ahead and sprinkle my chunky glitters all over it. And once that's nicely coated, I'm just going to come through and kind of tap it down, make sure I push any glitters back from around the bottom, because again, I don't really care if the bottom gets covered or not, and we don't want to have to worry about anything sticking up. And I am going to press it back from around the rim as well. And after I go through and tap down all my glitter, I'm just going to set that off to the side and let that dry. Once the glue has dried, we are going to go ahead and get our coats of epoxy over top of our raw glitter. I am going to epoxy the very bottom and the handle as well, because I want a nice smooth epoxied surface for what we want to do next. So this took me about 2 layers of epoxy to do. So you just kind of come through and do your first coat. And then if it's a little too lumpy, then you come through and add another coat if need be, which is what I ended up needing to do. Obviously, in between each coat of epoxy that you do, you want to make sure that it cures really well before you apply the next coat over top, and just give it a little sand if needed so that we have a nice smooth surface. And while our tumbler cures, let's go ahead and prepare our vinyls needed. So I found these beautiful Lotus silhouettes right off of Creative Fabrica, and when you upload it, it's going to come attached all together. And the way to detach everything, because I want to do the stems a separate color and the seed pod a different color, you're just going to highlight what you want to do. You're going to go over to your contour button, and you can delete some of the things that you don't want. So you can erase the stem off and just leave the flower portion, or vice versa, where you take the flower away, you just have to click on everything individually, so that way you have the stem left, so that way you can cut everything out that you need to. So I definitely need the lotus itself, the lotus flower itself, so that way we can do our peekaboo. But again, I'm going to cut the stems out in a separate color. I want those to be kind of this matte gold color, so I'm going to contour those and cut that out separately. And then for the dragonflies and frogs, I did kind of flip them so that way they kind of look a little bit different. And then I am going to use a gold as well for them, but it's actually kind of a different shade of gold. So one's a little bit darker or olive color, and the other one's a little bit more gold or greenish in color once the epoxy goes over top. Was it needed? Not really. I mean, you could even do like textured vinyls if you want to, but you know, it is what it is. I forgot to mention that obviously for the peekaboo that we want to do, you want to make sure that you cut it out in a semi-permanent vinyl, so that way it's easy to remove, because this is just a throwaway, okay? This is just a template to be able to spray over top and all that, and we're going to end up peeling it back and removing it anyways. So just a semi-permanent vinyl, so that way it can easily be peeled up. And on this big one here, I did leave the stem just so that way I know how far away I wanted to have it from the bottom. I wanted to utilize the full stem. So again, you didn't have to do that either. And I just wanted to make sure the seed pod had enough room too. So I made these big enough to where I could fit 2 really big ones, one on the front, one on the back, and then one really small one with one of the big ones. So, and this is a really big 40-ounce. I think it was like 5 inches in width, and then it was probably almost 7 inches in height. It's a pretty big one. So I went ahead and laid the flower petals up at the top there, just making sure, again, that I gave myself enough space at the bottom to be able to apply the stem and the seed pod off to the side. Then I flipped it around, and I'm going to apply the small one first on the bottom, and then I'm going to put the larger one over top, and then we'll just kind of manipulate the stems and stuff to make everything fit whenever we go to apply them after the fact. So now I'm going to take it outside, and I'm going to spray paint it white, and I'm going to let that dry really well before we move on to the next step. So I want to give it this kind of watercolor look, and I figure alcohol inks would work best for this. I chose a darker blue, kind of like a greenish blue. I just chose three different blues. Just that's all you want to do, just to give it some depth. I'm also going to work with some metallics. I have like a champagne gold, a rose gold, and then a pearl white. This next part's going to get a little messy, so I'm just going to put a paper towel underneath the area that I intend on working. And also, when working with 40 ounces, make sure that it's going to turn properly on your turner. Make sure that handle's not going to hit the bottom, because sometimes these are really big and sometimes our turners just won't fit it. You might have to lift up your turner or do what you need to do to be able to get that thing to fit down in there. But you would rather do it now versus whenever you're in the middle of working with it and having to handle it while it's wet with epoxy or product, you know what I mean? So I shook up my inks really good. Of course, I got it all over my hands. See, that's, it's art. That's what we do. We just get our stuff all over us. So the first step's first, make sure you get it on yourself and everywhere. All right. But you want to make sure you shake those up really well just to make sure all the pigment on the bottom gets distributed properly. I have some rubbing alcohol in a spritz bottle, and I am just going to heavily douse my tumbler with the rubbing alcohol. I did this on a past project. I'll tag it, but it works really easily. It just makes the alcohol inks kind of swirl around and give it more of that watercolor look. It's just an easy process. Or you could do it, just dabble it on yourself without having to do this part, whatever you guys want to do. I just really like the way it looks. So you pretty much just take all your blues, you're going to dabble those down as much as you would like, making sure that it stays wet. You want to see how wet it looks. You want to make sure it stays wet. And then, of course, I'm going to come through and do my metallics as well. Again, just as much as you think you need, okay? There's no right or wrong when it comes to making art, all right? I can't stress that enough. And the great thing about this is you're going to come through and do this multiple times, so it's going to look completely different from when it started to the end, obviously. So you're going to come through as many times as you need to get these inks looking the way you want. So now we're going to go ahead and finish up dabbling down here. I think I'm almost done doing what I need to do. And now I'm going to take some type of air movement. I have my blow dryer that I've just been using, and we are going to start blowing that around and distributing those colors and kind of spreading everything. And it's going to dry really fast because alcohol inks is obviously made of rubbing alcohol, and then we have the rubbing alcohol on the surface, and all that dries really quick. So once it stops moving around, then we're just going to look at it and we're just going to think about what we want to do next. Obviously, we want to douse it again with our rubbing alcohol. So I'm going to spritz it a few more times. I'm going to let it sit a second and just see how it looks, because it gives it that cool watercolor look whenever you spritz it. And then we're going to come through and just kind of keep layering everything on until we like the way it looks and blowing it around. That's all you want to do. Simple as that. Now, as you've seen there, I added a little bit of bronze, which I didn't have initially. I just felt like it really needed that extra gold kick. And right here is my finishing color on a dry base. I didn't add any rubbing alcohol yet. I'm going to sprinkle down some of that darker blue. I just felt like it needed a little bit more depth to it. And what I'm going to do is, after I sprinkle down the blue, I'm going to activate it by spritzing it with the rubbing alcohol as it's turning. And that's pretty much all I did. That's pretty much it. I just kind of let it do its thing. After this, after I doused it down, I didn't really hit it up with the blow dryer too much. I just let it spin and turn on its own like that. And then I just kind of dried it just a little bit on low, just to make sure that it didn't go too far on me. But this is on low, so I didn't push it around too much. I just very, very carefully came through and dried it. And that's pretty much it. That's all I did for my base. And of course, you guys know that alcohol inks dry very fast. You can pretty much move right into removing those decals from our base, exposing our beautiful glitter pattern of our flowers underneath. Now, before we add our finishing decals, I'm going to put a coat of epoxy over top, and into some of my final coats here, I am going to add some sparkle dust. As you see, it got over my glove and in there. So, but it's just, I think silver is what I did, I believe. Anyways, I'll put it in the description box, all the glitters I used. So we're going to go ahead and get a coating of epoxy over top of our surface here. Of course, hitting it up with our torch after we get it onto our turner to pop any little micro bubbles. And we will let that cure before moving on to the next step. So here are the two different color vinyls I was talking about. See how one's like more gold and the other one's more like an olive gold? That's what I was talking about. Was it needed? Not really. I mean, once this gets put on, it's kind of noticeable, I guess. I don't know. I think I would have rather have done like a textured metallic vinyl. I think that's what I would have rather done. Anyways, it turned out cute still. All right, before we do those decals, let's go ahead and clean up our rim. And of course, we're going to give it a little sand, making sure we expose just a little bit of that silver underneath. It just gives it a really pretty finishing touch. And of course, we'll come through and sand any lumps and bumps on the tumbler base itself as well, giving us a nice smooth surface to work with these metallic vinyls. And the next step is coming through and adding all of our stems and seed pods onto our lotus flowers, adding down our frogs and our dragonflies. This was one of those ones I just didn't really feel like it needed a quote. I just really wanted the art to speak to, for itself. So I didn't really add a quote to it. I don't really think it needed it. If anything, maybe some personalization, but other than that, I don't think it really needed too much more. I did, however, think it needed just a little hint of a little bit more green, just, a hint of like lily pads, so I'm using spring fling, and I'm just going to just sprinkle that in just area. And I don't want it too much on my seed pods and stuff. I just wanted it kind of around everything. So that's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to lightly sprinkle that in between. Of course, I'm going to come through and add its last finishing coats of epoxy over top, or its finishing coats of epoxy over top, and she is ready to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.